From Anshe Sfard Beth El Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Parshat Emor, the status of the Cohen. I'd like to discuss a fascinating pasuk in our parsha, really just one word, v'kidashto. You shall sanctify him. It's our role to sanctify the Cohen. Why? It seems to say that since he is the one who offers our bread, offers our sacrifices, the daily bread of God, so to speak, on the altar, therefore we have to sanctify him. We have to prop him up. We have to give him special status. So the question is, what does it mean? How do you sanctify the Cohen? What do you say? Honored Cohen. What are you supposed to do to him? So the Mishnah in Gittin kind of seems to address this issue. On the other hand, not necessarily. Elu devarim ibnei darkei shalom. These are the things which the Rabbi said because of the ways of peace. You don't want to have debates and fights in a congregation. And sometimes, unfortunately, there are debates in a congregation. But we try to minimize it. How? Kohen korei rishon v'acharav Levi v'acharav Yisrael mipnei darkei shalom. The Mishnah in Gittin 59a, Nun Tet Amud Aleph, says that we always have a Kohen, then a Levi, then an Israelite, and that way it minimizes fights. Who gets the first Aliyah? It's the Kohen. Who gets the second one? It's the Levi. Who's the third? It's an Israelite. Who gets the fourth and fifth? That you have to fight over. But in any event, it minimizes the fighting. Now, does that show that we honor the Kohen by giving him the first? Not necessarily. It's more like we don't want to have fights, so we create a system. Within that system, why do we make the system like this? Why don't we give the first aliyah to someone else? That could be that's because of something else, some obligation to honor the Kohen. And that's what the Gemara says. Minani mile. How do we know that you put the Kohen first? Amar Rav Masna, the Gemara says, Rav Matna says, Tamar Kra. He gives one particular source. But Reb Chia bar Abba Amar Miyacha, he says the source is like this: V'kidashto, that you should honor the Kohen. This week's parsha, l'chol davar shebekdusha, in any realm of holiness. Now that makes it seem like only in the realm of holiness. I don't have to let him open the door for him to let him in first. I don't have to, if I'm at the table, I don't have to give him the first piece of cake because it's only for matters of holiness. I don't have to honor him in matters that are not regarding holiness. However, we have Tana Deber Ishmael, we have a Brisa, and it goes on, V'kidashto. This week's parsha says you should honor him, L'chol davar shebekdusha, in all matters of holiness. That's the same phrase we saw before. But then they give examples. Liftoach rishon, he should be the first. You should open up. Open up what? Well, Rashi says, the laning, the Torah reading. Rashi, Chol davar kavod, any honor of honor, any matter of honor, bein b'Torah, bein b'yeshiva. Hu yidaber barosh. If you're sitting around, let him speak first. So Rashi seems to take it into the realm of the secular. That even in the secular realm, a number of people are expressing their opinion. Let's hear from him first. He's the Kohen. Liftoach rishon. But you could interpret more narrowly, only for the aliyah, the first aliyah. Levarich rishon, the benching, and the meal. Litol mana yafer rishon, and also to take the first portion. Where do you take the first portion? Rashi says in anything. In any time you're dividing up portions. The Tosfos says, no, it could go in Meiser Ani. And when it comes to the tithing for the poor, tzedakah, charity, imhu ani, chaverim hayoshim mesuda. He says, or a bunch of friends are sitting around, you can get the first piece of cake. But the shutfus lo amrina. So there is an idea that when it comes to partnership, he doesn't necessarily get the first piece because after all, you should be generous. Everyone should want the other person to get the first piece. When it comes to partnerships, it doesn't apply. So there may be some limitation in the secular realm on the extent to which we give him honor. Now, this notion that the Cohen is to get the first aliyah is not as simple as you think, because the Gemara actually mentions that Rav Kari B'Kohani, that Rav used to get the first aliyah, Rav Huna Kari B'Kohani, that some of these rabbis, they used to get the first aliyah. because they were the undisputed greatest sages of their time. Now you could argue that since it was so clear that they were such great sages, there's no fight over it. Of course he gets the first aliyah. He's Rav, one of the greatest rabbis in the Talmud. But if you're someone like me or another rabbi, well, you could argue this rabbi is greater than that rabbi. The other rabbi, person who's not a rabbi, he's greater. You could argue who's greater. That's why we put the Cohen first. But if someone is undisputedly the greatest, maybe that's different. The Rambam goes on a rampage in the Perush HaMishnayos, and he says people don't know what they're doing. He says they call an Amaretz, a person ignorant Cohen, they call him first. They have no idea what they're talking about. It has no basis, no root, klal. It's not mentioned in the Talmud. He says he can't believe it that they have this terrible custom. He says they're stuck, they're sick with their customs. They have an illness of being overly reliant on their customs and the way that they tend to do things. He says it's not following the Talmud. He says, I don't know where they got this from. He says that Cohen is before Levi. That's only if there's no scholar. If there's no scholar, then you give it to the Cohen. But if there is a scholar, clearly the scholar must get it. But as my father of blessed memory pointed out, the Rambam somehow came to actually writing his book. He calmed down and he said, well, that's the minhag. Minhag pashut, that's the simple custom. Although it may be foolish, that's the custom that the Cohen reads, even if he's not a scholar. He comes before the sage, before even a great sage of Israel. And then beyond that, beyond the Cohen Levi, then the more honored would come first. So theoretically, perhaps the Rambam would put the Shlishi would be for the honored person. Perhaps if there's no Cohen, should give the rabbi first, give the scholar first, and then others. That when there's no Cohen, it's not that no rules. There is a rule. The scholar always comes first. We're supposed to honor the scholar. There is an interesting Mordechai that we must share as well regarding the question of secular use of a Cohen. One time there was a fellow who poured water on Rabbi Tam, on the rabbi's hands, to help him wash his hands. So they asked him, they said, don't you know that you can't use a Cohen? Because it says so in the Jerusalem Talmud. And he answered, that was in the olden days, when Lechem Elokecha Hu Makri, when he brought sacrifices. But nowadays, that they don't have sanctity anymore. They don't wear their holy garments. It doesn't apply anymore. So they said to Rabbeinu Tam, one of the Tosfot, Rashi's grandson, they said, wait a second. Then why do you give him the first aliyah? Shasak Rabbeinu Tam. The Rabbeinu Tam didn't know what to answer. He got stuck. But Rabbeinu Peter, there was a rabbi whose name was Peter, and he gave the following, or Peter, he gave the following answer, it's true, they have holiness, but they can be moichel, they can waive their holiness if they want to. And so it says in the Code of Jewish Law, as well, at the end of the laws of the Siyas Kapayim, 128 in the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, the Ashkenazic gloss, he says, Asur l'ishtamesh b'Kohen. You don't use a Kohen. Don't tell the Kohen, can you open the door for me? You get me this, get me my slippers. Afilu zman hazeh. Even nowadays, forget what Rabbeinu Tam said. Tahavi k'moral behekdesh. It's like you're using the holy object, a holy person. Imlo machal al kach. If he didn't forgive or forgo his right. There is a question as to whether Cohen can forgo their honor. And generally we say, yes, a Cohen can forgo his honor, whether it's for the aliyah, whether it is for the benching. However, we try to minimize doing that because this is the way the takana was set up, and you'll lead to further dispute, because if you ask the Cohen to be mochel, then who knows who gets the aliyah? This bar mitzvah, the other bar mitzvah. So we try not to ask the Cohen to be mochel on a regular basis. So mitzvah v'kidashto, mitzvah of honoring the Cohen, most authorities say it even still applies today, to give honor to the Cohen, to recognize that those among us who are of the priestly status, they've been given this status. I might argue the following. We have to recognize that each of us has a special status. As a Jewish person, someone who God has given us the status of the children of Israel. And we also have to give ourselves self-respect as human beings, as people, to appreciate our special role in the world to bring holiness and sanctity, not only to ourselves and our community, but to the entire world. Thank you for joining us here at the Anshe Sfard Beth Elameth congregation for our discussion today. And join us each week for further discussions. See the archives of our past discussions as well. Thank you to Jason Lefkowitz for making today's presentation possible. And we learn, as we do throughout the year, L'Zecher Nishmas, in memory of my father, of blessed memory, Baruch Reb Chaim Shmuel, Yehi Zichro Baruch, may his memory be a blessing.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.